No, no, this can't be. You lied to me for 4 years, Tasha? I said it out loud, to no one but myself, my voice shaking in the quiet of my kitchen. I was standing there in my slippers, still in my nightgown, holding a bank statement that felt heavier than any burden I had carried before. 4 years. 4 years of trust. 4 years of believing I was helping my grandson survive after his father died. And in that moment, I understood one terrible truth. I had been lied to. And this morning, I finally understood. Not a single one of those dollars had been for my grandson. My name is Olivia Harris. I'm 60 years old, a retired nurse, and a widow. I live in Milwaukee in the same brick bungalow where I raised my son, Marcus. 4 years ago, I buried him. Or at least, I thought I did. I stood at his funeral, held his sobbing wife in my arms, and promised to help raise their son. Since that day, I've sent money to Tasha, his widow, the mother of my only grandchild, Zayden. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself I was honoring Marcus's memory. But I was wrong. So very wrong. Just 3 days ago, I showed up unannounced at Tasha's place. I couldn't take the silence anymore. Months without seeing Zayden. Excuses piling higher and higher. So I packed a bag of groceries, baked some cornbread, and drove across town to her apartment. I stood there on the porch, heart pounding like a schoolgirl's, holding the food in one hand and a little toy fire truck I found at the Dollar Tree in the other. I knocked once, twice. When she opened the door, her expression fell faster than her fake smile rose. She looked surprised, but not the kind of surprise that comes with joy, the kind that comes with fear. "Miss Olivia," she said flatly. "I came to see Zayden," I said softly, forcing a smile. "I brought cornbread, his favorite." End quote. She stepped halfway outside and pulled the door nearly shut behind her. "Now's not a good time." "I won't stay long. Just want to see him for a minute," I said, trying to peer over her shoulder. She crossed her arms. "He's with a friend." They went out. I blinked. "On a school night?" She hesitated, just for a second. "It's a special outing." I swallowed my doubt and tried again. "Tasha, it's been months. You haven't returned my calls, and the last picture I got of Zayden was from Christmas. I send money every month. I just need to see him." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you checking up on me? You think I'm doing something wrong?" "No, I just miss him." I placed the toy truck gently on the porch railing. "He's my grandson, Tasha." That's when her voice changed sharp, hard. "You don't get to barge in here and question how I'm raising my son. You think just because you send money, you get to control everything?" "I'm not trying to control anything," I said, my voice cracking. "I just want to know the money is helping him. That he's okay. That you're okay." She laughed bitterly. "Oh, so now I'm a thief too?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to," she snapped. "I knew this day would come. You always looked at me like I wasn't good enough for Marcus. You never trusted me." "That's not true." "Don't lie to me," she shouted, stepping closer. "You come here, uninvited, accusing me, pretending you're the victim." "I just want to see my grandson," I said again, this time whispering. "Please, Tasha." She shoved the grocery bag from my arms. It hit the ground, apples spilling out and rolling down the steps. I reached to pick them up, and she shoved me back with one hand. My knees buckled, and I caught myself on the porch railing before I fell completely. "Get off my property," she hissed, "and don't come back." I stood there stunned, heart racing, hands scraped. The screen door slammed shut, and I stood outside that house for a long time, staring at the cracked concrete, feeling every year of my age in my bones. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea that went cold an hour in. I kept hearing her words twisting, biting. I wasn't sure what hurt more, her anger or the fear behind it. That was 3 days ago, and this morning, the truth I feared finally arrived. The bank teller had printed my transaction history like she always did, all smiles and casual chatter. But when I got home and checked the latest statements, something caught my eye. The account number was different from the one I'd been sending money to for years. I ran to the drawer under the fridge and pulled out the old transfer receipts. Tasha's original bank information was there, handwritten on the back of an envelope the day she came to me in tears after the funeral. This new account, it wasn't hers. It wasn't even in her name. I called her, voicemail, texted, no reply. And then, standing in my quiet kitchen, staring at the cold proof in my hands, I said the words I'd been holding back. No, this can't be. You lied to me for 4 years, Tasha? The kettle started whistling behind me, but I didn't move. The photo of Marcus and Zayden on the wall stared back at me like a question I didn't know how to answer. I thought I was helping. I thought I was doing right by my family. But something was terribly, painfully wrong. And for the first time in years, I stopped pretending everything was okay. I needed answers. And I wasn't going to stop until I got them. If you feel Olivia's pain, tap like and drop your city in the comments. Someone near you might be watching this too. I didn't sleep the night I discovered the account change. I lay on my couch with the folder of receipts clutched to my chest, heart pounding like a warning bell. The silence in the house felt different now, heavier, like it knew something I didn't. I kept staring at the last page of the bank statement as if somehow the numbers would shift and explain themselves. But they didn't. The only thing that made sense was the part that hurt the most. Tasha had changed the account, not by accident. Not once, but deliberately, over time, without telling me. And that meant one thing: this wasn't a mistake. This was a betrayal. By mid-morning, I had made up my mind. I needed someone to help me uncover the truth. Someone who wouldn't treat me like I was overreacting or just a grieving old woman with too much time and too little trust. So, I called Denise. Denise Taylor had been my best friend since we were 13, back when we both wore church hats too big for our heads and dreamed of marrying Smokey Robinson. She'd gone into law enforcement, worked 25 years with Milwaukee PD before retiring early after her knee surgery. These days, she played cards on Thursdays and mentored kids at the community center. But she never stopped knowing how to read people. She picked up on the second ring. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I whispered. "Can you come over?" 20 minutes later, she pulled into my driveway in that old navy blue Buick that always smelled like menthol and caramel candies. She didn't ask questions right away. Just walked in, set her purse on the counter, and sat across from me at the kitchen table. I slid the statement toward her. Then the folder. She didn't say a word for the first 5 minutes, just flipped through the pages, brows furrowed, eyes sharp and quiet. When she was done, she leaned back in her chair, folded her arms, and looked at me like she was lining up a shot in one of her detective interviews. "How long you been sending this money?" 4 years. Since Marcus died. She nodded slowly. "And you never checked the account info?" "I had no reason to. It was always the same. Until now." Denise tapped the corner of the statement. "This change didn't happen recently. Look at the dates. This account's been receiving funds for almost a year now." I stared at her. "A year?" She nodded again, jaw tight. "Maybe longer. Hard to say without the older records." I felt sick. A year. That meant Zayden might not have seen a single penny in over 12 months. I thought of his little face, his tiny hands playing with toy trucks, the way he used to call me Nan Olivia. All that time, I thought I was helping him, providing for him, loving him the only way I could. And Tasha, she let me believe that. "I went by her house a few days ago," I said quietly. Denise raised an eyebrow. "You didn't tell me that." I was embarrassed. She yelled at me, pushed me, accused me of trying to control her. "She laid hands on you?" Denise's voice dropped into a register I hadn't heard since her badge days. "Not hard. Just enough to make her point." Denise shook her head. "You should have told me right then." "I know," I said. I wasn't ready to believe it. Not until I saw the account change. She leaned forward. "What do you want to do now?" "I want to know where the money went. Who owns that new account? And where the hell my grandson is." Denise cracked her knuckles. "All right then. First step, we pull everything you've got, every statement, every receipt. We build a timeline. Then I make a few calls." "To who?" "Old contacts. You remember Curtis from the fraud division?" I nodded. "He owes me a favor, and I still got friends in the right places. If someone opened that account fraudulently, we'll find it. And if Tasha's hiding something, we'll dig it up." I sat there, overwhelmed by equal parts dread and relief. I didn't want this to be true, but I needed it to be, because the only thing worse than being betrayed is never knowing for sure. Denise looked me in the eye. "You ready for whatever we find?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood, walked to the living room, and picked up the photo of Marcus and Zayden from the mantel. It was taken at a summer barbecue 2 years before Marcus died. Marcus had a toothpick in his mouth and barbecue sauce on his shirt. Zayden was in his arms, grinning like the world was made of ice cream. I held the frame to my chest. I'm ready. Because I had to be. For Marcus, for Zayden, for me. The next morning, Denise came over early, holding a thermos of strong coffee and a manila envelope that she slapped down on my kitchen table like a search warrant. She meant business, and it showed in the way her eyes didn't smile, even when she greeted me. "Didn't sleep either, huh?" she asked. I shook my head. "Did you find something?" "I found a name," she said, flipping the envelope open and pulling out a few printed documents. "The new account your money's been going into, it's registered to a woman named Vanessa Hollins. Not Tasha, no aliases, no joint accounts." The name meant nothing to me. I furrowed my brow, confused. "Who is she?" "I don't know any Vanessa." "That's what we're going to find out," Denise said, taking a sip from her thermos. "She lives in Des Moines, Iowa, works part-time at a bookstore and does in-home daycare." My heart skipped. "Daycare?" Denise nodded slowly. "Yeah, and Olivia, she has a kid, listed on her emergency contact paperwork. A kid named Zayden Marcus Hollins." I froze. Denise let the word sink in. "Zayden. That's my grandson's full name," I whispered. Denise didn't flinch. "I think she has him." I staggered back into the kitchen chair, feeling the blood drain from my face. "How? Why would Tasha?" "We don't know yet," Denise said gently. "But I checked court records. Vanessa filed for temporary guardianship of Zayden almost a year ago. And get this, Marcus signed the affidavit." I looked up at her, blinking. "Marcus is dead." Denise gave me a long, quiet look. "You sure about that?" I felt something crack inside me, deep and dark and terrifying. "Don't do that, Denise. Don't suggest—" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just telling you what's on the paperwork. Either someone forged his signature, or Marcus is alive." I pressed a hand to my mouth. Denise stood up and began to pace. "Look, I've seen a lot of things in my years on the force. People fake deaths, especially if they're in trouble. Debts, criminal charges, custody battles. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but we have to follow this thread." I couldn't speak. My mind was spinning too fast. Marcus, alive? My son, my baby. I had buried a closed casket. I had mourned every birthday, every Father's Day, every memory. Could it have all been a lie? Denise sat back down. "What do you want to do, Liv?" I looked down at the bank papers and the guardianship documents. There were too many pieces missing. I needed to see Zayden. I needed to know he was okay. "I want to go to Des Moines." Denise nodded, unsurprised. "I thought you'd say that. We leave tomorrow." The drive to Des Moines took us 5.5 hours. We took Denise's Buick, the back seat filled with folders and a cooler of turkey sandwiches. It rained for the first 100 miles, and neither of us spoke much. The only sound was the steady beat of the windshield wipers and the occasional gospel song playing low on the radio. I kept thinking of Marcus. I remembered the first time I held him, the way he'd snore softly when he napped in his crib. How he once scraped his knee learning to ride a bike and said, "Don't tell nobody, Mama. I want to look tough." He had grown into a kind man, or so I believed. What could have made him disappear like that? What kind of pain, or fear, or shame? We pulled into Des Moines around 4 p.m. and drove to the address listed on Vanessa's daycare license. It was a small, well-kept home with a white picket fence and flower beds that someone clearly tended with love. The kind of place that smelled like cinnamon and sounded like lullabies. We parked across the street. Denise handed me a pair of binoculars. "Just observe today. No drama." I gave her a side eye, but I knew she was right. At exactly 4:30, the front door opened, and there he was. Zayden, my baby's baby. He was taller now and a little leaner, but his face, Lord, his face was the same. Round cheeks, curious eyes, the same lopsided grin Marcus had at his age. He wore a red hoodie and carried a Spider-Man backpack. And he looked happy. He ran into the arms of a dark-skinned woman with long braids and warm eyes, Vanessa. She scooped him up, spun him around, kissed his forehead. He called her Mama. I felt my heart break in slow motion. I turned away, tears burning my eyes. "That's him." Denise nodded. "That's your boy." I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweater. She's not hurting him. She seems good. She might be. But that doesn't mean what happened was right. I nodded, voice trembling. We find out the whole truth, every piece. Denise turned the ignition. Tomorrow, we go to the courthouse. We'll pull custody filings, birth certificates, anything linked to Marcus or Tasha. If he's alive, there'll be a trail. I looked back at the house. Zayden was inside now, the porch light glowing warmly against the coming night. My hands curled in my lap. I had found him. But finding him was only the beginning. The courthouse smelled like old paper, floor cleaner, and something faintly metallic like the echo of every argument that had ever died inside its walls. Denise parked 2 blocks away, and we walked the rest of the distance in silence. The sky over Des Moines was a dull gray, the kind that pressed down on your shoulders and made everything feel heavier than it already was. Inside, the security guard waved us through with barely a glance. Denise had that look confident, calm, like she belonged anywhere official. I stayed close to her side, clutching my purse the way I used to clutch Marcus's hand when he was small and scared of crowds. We found the records office on the 2nd floor. A woman with thin glasses and a tired smile sat behind the counter. Her nameplate read, M. Keller. Denise leaned in first. "We're looking for guardianship and custody filings for a minor," Denise said evenly. "Name is Zayden Marcus Carter. Filed roughly 11 months ago." Miss Keller typed for a long moment, her fingers moving faster than her eyes. Then she paused. "Yes," she said. "I see it." My heart jumped into my throat. "Can we see it?" She hesitated, eyes flicking between Denise and me. "Are you family?" "I'm his grandmother," I said. "His paternal grandmother." Miss Keller studied my face, maybe reading the grief etched into it whether she meant to or not. She sighed softly. "I'll print what I can. You'll need to request full copies formally, but I can let you review the basics." She disappeared into the back, and I sat down hard on the nearest chair, my legs suddenly weak. Denise touched my arm. "You okay?" "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't know what I'm about to see." A minute later, Miss Keller returned with a thin stack of papers. She slid them across the counter. The first page hit me like a punch. Petition for temporary guardianship. Filed by Vanessa Hollins. Minor, Zayden Marcus Carter. Consent, Marcus Carter. My eyes dropped to the signature. Marcus's name. My son's handwriting was unmistakable, slanted slightly to the right. The loop in the M, the heavy downstroke on the C. I had seen that signature 1,000 times on birthday cards, school permission slips, old checks he used to help me balance when he was a teenager. "This isn't forged," I whispered. Denise exhaled slowly. "No, it's not." The room seemed to tilt. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. "But he's dead," I said. "I buried him." Miss Keller cleared her throat awkwardly. "Ma'am, according to our records, Mr. Carter appeared in person for the filing, provided valid ID." Denise's jaw tightened. "When?" "About 11 months ago." 11 months. That meant while I was still sending Tasha money every single month, while I was begging her at the door just days ago to let me see my grandson. While she was crying and yelling and calling herself the victim, all that time my son was alive, breathing, signing papers, making decisions about his child, without me. I sank back into the chair, tears blurring the words on the page. Denise leaned over the counter. "Any address listed for Marcus?" Miss Keller scanned the paperwork. "There was a temporary address at the time. It's redacted on this copy, but I can tell you it wasn't local." Denise nodded. "Thank you." End quote. But have sinned quote. We stepped away from the counter, and Denise guided me to a bench near the windows. Outside, people walked past with coffee cups and briefcases, their lives moving forward like nothing had shattered inside me. "How long?" I asked, staring at my hands. "How long has he been alive?" Denise sat beside me. "At least a year, maybe more." I thought of every holiday I'd cried myself to sleep, every time I talked to his picture like he could hear me, every time I asked God why he took my only son and left me with this hollow ache. And all along, Marcus was out there. I didn't know whether to scream or collapse. "There's more," Denise said quietly. I looked at her. She pulled out another page. Vanessa was granted guardianship because Tasha voluntarily relinquished custody. The words barely registered. She what? She signed over custody, Denise repeated, citing personal instability and financial hardship. Best from. I let out a hollow laugh that didn't sound like it belonged to me. Financial hardship, I repeated, after taking $1,000 from me every month. Denise shook her head. Olivia, this wasn't just neglect, this was a plan. My chest tightened. Why would Marcus agree to this? Denise didn't answer right away. She looked at the paperwork again, then at me. Because whatever made him disappear, she said carefully, made him believe this was the safest option. I closed my eyes. Marcus had always been stubborn, proud, the kind of man who thought he could carry the world alone and never ask for help. If he was in trouble, real trouble, he might have thought vanishing was the only way to protect his son. But that didn't excuse the lies, or the money, or letting me grieve a son who wasn't gone. We left the courthouse an hour later with copies, notes, and more questions than answers. Back in the car, Denise started the engine but didn't pull away. What now? I asked. She looked straight ahead. Now we talked to Vanessa, face to face. My stomach dropped. Today? If we wait, word gets around. People start hiding things. I stared out the windshield, heart pounding. What if she won't talk to me? Denise finally turned to me. Then we make her understand you're not going anywhere. I thought of Zayden's smile, the way he'd looked safe, loved. I squared my shoulders. I'm ready. 80 now. Because whatever the truth was about Tasha, about Marcus, about the money, it was time I stopped being the woman things happened to. It was time I started asking questions no one could ignore. The sun was beginning to dip low in the sky by the time we pulled back into the neighborhood. The golden light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows on the sidewalk, as if the world itself were holding its breath. We parked across the street from Vanessa's house again, same picket fence, same quiet calm. Only this time, we weren't here to observe. We were here for answers. You sure you're up for this? Denise asked, cutting the engine. I have to be, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I've been living in the dark too long. I stepped out of the car and walked across the street before I had time to second-guess myself. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. Denise followed close behind, her presence quiet but solid, like a guard at my back. I rang the doorbell and waited. A moment later, the door creaked open. Vanessa stood there in a floral apron, a streak of flower across her cheek. Her eyes widened when she saw me, then narrowed with wariness. Miss Olivia, she said slowly, I didn't expect you. I tried to find the right words. My mouth was dry. I'm here for the truth, I said. All of it. Behind me, Denise stepped forward. We don't want trouble. We just want answers. And maybe a little kindness. Vanessa looked between us, then glanced behind her into the house. I could hear the faint sounds of a cartoon playing somewhere in the back. Finally, she opened the door wider. You should come in. We stepped inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and something baking cookies, maybe. It was warm, lived in, comfortable in a way that made my throat tighten. A few toys were scattered in the living room, and there were photos on the wall, pictures of Zayden at school, in Halloween costumes, smiling wide at birthday parties. Pictures I had never seen. Vanessa led us into the kitchen. Zayden's watching a movie, she said softly. He doesn't know who you are. That cut deeper than I was ready for. She motioned for us to sit. I took a chair at the kitchen table, while Denise stood near the counter, arms crossed. You already know, Vanessa said without prompting. Or you wouldn't be here. I nodded. I know he's alive. Vanessa sat across from me, her hands folded tightly in her lap. I didn't lie to you, not directly. I never meant to hurt you. But you knew, I said, trying to keep my voice even. You knew I was grieving a son who wasn't dead. You took my money. Vanessa flinched. I never touched a cent. Every dollar that came to that account went into a trust for Zayden. I blinked. A trust? She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small black binder. Flipping it open, she slid it across the table. Inside were deposit records, account balances, even interest earnings, all neatly cataloged. I scanned them, confused. So, Tasha set this up? Vanessa shook her head. Marcus did. The name alone made me stiffen. When? A year ago. He contacted me out of the blue, said he needed help, that he was in trouble, Legal trouble, financial, personal, you name it. He said he couldn't trust Tasha anymore. Said she was spiraling, and Zayden wasn't safe. I sat frozen, barely breathing. He didn't want to go to the authorities. Said it would blow everything up. He asked if I'd take Zayden, temporarily. Said it wouldn't be long. And you said yes? Vanessa gave me a sad smile. Marcus saved my life once, back in college. We were never more than friends, but I owed him. And when I saw the state Zayden was in, I couldn't say no. Tears burned in my eyes. But why not come to me? Why not tell me he was alive? Vanessa looked down. He said you were better off thinking he was gone, that if anyone knew he was alive, it would put you at risk too. Denise stepped in then. Risk from what? Who was after him? Vanessa hesitated. I don't know the full story. He wouldn't say. Just that Tasha got involved with someone dangerous, that Marcus had found something he shouldn't have, and that he was trying to fix it quietly. End quote. I sat back in the chair, overwhelmed. And Tasha? I asked. She was furious when Marcus took Zayden, Vanessa said. She gave up custody because she had no choice. He had documentation, proof of neglect, texts, photos. He said he was going to the courts anyway, so she signed off to avoid exposure. Denise scoffed, and kept taking money from Olivia like nothing happened. She doesn't know about the trust, Vanessa said. She thinks the money goes to me. She thinks I'm helping cover expenses. Marcus told her that. I felt like the walls were closing in. And where is he now? I asked. Marcus? Vanessa shook her head. I don't know. I haven't heard from him in months. The last time, he said he was getting close to finishing what he started. He sounded tired, scared. I clenched my hands. He let me bury him, Vanessa. I mourned him. I know, she whispered. I told him he was wrong, that you didn't deserve that. But he swore it was for your protection. We sat in silence, the kitchen clock ticking loudly in the background. Finally, I stood. I want to see my grandson, I said. Vanessa didn't argue. She simply nodded and led me to the hallway. Zayden, she called gently, knocking on the door. Can you come out for a minute? The door opened, and there he was. Taller, leaner, but still my baby's baby. He looked up at me with curious eyes. Hi. I swallowed a sob and smiled. Hi, sweetheart. 7 dimes. He didn't know me. Not yet, but he would. I was going to make sure of that. Zayden's eyes studied me for a long moment. His face was calm, unreadable in a way only children can be watchful, waiting for a cue. I knelt slowly, just enough to be on his level, heart pounding. My name is Olivia, I said gently. I'm your Nana. He tilted his head, thoughtful. Vanessa's my mom. A sharp pain shot through my chest, but I smiled. She's a very good one. I can see that. But I used to rock you when you were a baby. You used to sleep on my chest after your daddy Marcus would bring you over to visit me. His brows furrowed. You know my daddy? I nodded. I do. I love him very much. And I love you too. He didn't move, just stared at me a second longer. Then quietly he asked, Do you like dinosaurs? I let out a trembling laugh. I love dinosaurs. He reached for my hand. That's when the tears came slow, warm, and silent. He didn't flinch. Just pulled me toward the living room and started talking about a book he'd been reading, pointing to a blue dinosaur toy on the coffee table. Behind us I heard Vanessa murmur to Denise, He's never warmed up to anyone that fast. Denise responded, Blood knows blood. We stayed for another hour. Zayden showed me his toy box, his bookshelf, even a crayon drawing he'd made of a stick figure family. In it, there were 3 people, a man, a woman with braids, Vanessa, and a small child. I wasn't there, but I would be. Somehow, I would be. Vanessa sat across from me after putting Zayden to bed. Her voice was softer now, as though the air had shifted. You can come visit him anytime, she said. He deserves to know who you are. Thank you, I said quietly. And Marcus? I haven't heard from him since June. It was now early October. That's 4 months, I said. That's too long. I know, Vanessa said. I've called, texted. He said if I didn't hear from him in 90 days, I should burn the phone. He's off-grid. Denise leaned in. Did he ever say who he was hiding from? No names, Vanessa said. But he mentioned something about Tasha's connections, money being laundered. Some man she got involved with. He had ties to a real estate group. Maybe something criminal. My stomach sank. And you believed him? I did, she said, because I saw the fear in his eyes. Denise stood and paced. That changes this whole thing. If Marcus was investigating something, maybe Tasha found out. Maybe that's why she snapped. She didn't just snap, I murmured. She tried to erase me from his life, from Zayden's life, and Marcus let her. Silence stretched between us. Finally, Denise said, we need to talk to Tasha again, this time with facts. Vanessa looked up. She'll deny everything. She can try, Denise said, but I've got a friend in Milwaukee PD's fraud division. If Tasha cashed even one check in her name, that's wire fraud. And if she lied about Marcus being dead, that's criminal too. I stood. Then we go back. Vanessa hesitated. One more thing. She walked to a drawer and pulled out a small envelope. Marcus left this. Said if something ever happened, to give it to you. I took the envelope in shaking hands. On the front, in my son's handwriting, for Mama if I go too far to come back. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I tucked it inside my purse and nodded. The road back to Milwaukee would be long, but this time, I was bringing more than questions. I was bringing a name, a truth, a grandchild's hand in mine. We left Des Moines at dawn. The sun rose behind us. Ahead, back home, the reckoning was coming. The road back to Milwaukee stretched out in quiet tension. Denise drove in silence, eyes sharp on the highway, while I sat in the passenger seat, clutching Marcus's letter in my lap like it might vanish if I looked away too long. I hadn't opened it yet. Part of me was terrified of what it might say. The other part needed to hear my son's voice, needed something that connected us in a way no lie, no betrayal could sever. The envelope felt heavier than paper had any right to be. It wasn't until we crossed the Illinois state line that I finally took a deep breath and slid my finger beneath the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded carefully. My hands shook as I opened it. Dear Mama, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't finish what I started. It means I had to disappear, maybe for good. I didn't want this. I never wanted to hurt you, but I couldn't risk dragging you into what I found. Tasha got involved with someone dangerous. His name's Clay Vernon. On the surface, he runs luxury real estate developments, but behind the curtain, it's money laundering, extortion, and worse. I only found out by accident an old laptop she left unlocked. I took screenshots, backed everything up. I was going to take it to the police, but I waited too long. The day I confronted her, she threatened to make sure I never saw my son again. Said Clay had people everywhere, and if I opened my mouth, I'd regret it. That's when I knew I had to get Zayden away. I didn't want you to know, Mama. Because if you did, they'd watch you. They'd use you. I needed them to believe I was gone for good. I don't know if I made the right call, but Vanessa's good. She's safe. She'll love Zayden the way he deserves. And I know one day you'll find him. You always had a way of finding light in the dark. Tell him about me. When it's safe, tell him I loved him enough to vanish. I love you, Mama. I'm sorry for everything. Marcus. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. He was in danger, real danger, and instead of running to me, he ran from me to protect me. It didn't make the pain hurt less, but it made the silence make sense. Denise glanced over at me. You okay? I wiped my face. No, but I understand now. She nodded. We've got a name now, Clay Vernon. I looked at her. You think he's still in Milwaukee? If Marcus is still hiding, then Clay's reach is longer than we thought. The scribed. We arrived back in the city late that evening. The lights of Milwaukee shimmered in the distance as we exited the freeway. My neighborhood, once a place of comfort, now felt like the edge of a battlefield. We didn't go home. We went straight to Denise's contact at the precinct. Detective Ron Wallace, retired 2 years ago, now consulting for financial crimes. Denise had worked cases with him back in the day. He met us at a diner just off Mitchell Street. Worn booths, strong coffee, and a waitress who called everyone honey. After brief introductions, Denise laid out the documents, bank records, guardianship filings, Vanessa's trust statements, and finally, the letter. Wallace read everything slowly, carefully, eyes narrowing as he went. When he finished, he let out a low whistle. You weren't kidding. This is heavy. Can you run Vernon's name through the system? Denise asked. He nodded. Already did before I came. He's clean officially. But that just means he has good people scrubbing after him. He turned to me. You say Marcus disappeared after poking around in Vernon's business? I nodded. Wallace rubbed his jaw. Then odds are he's either in deep hiding or someone made sure he stays missing. The words made my blood go cold. No body, no death certificate, I said. Just a closed casket. Wallace raised an eyebrow. Closed casket? I nodded. Car fire. They said it was unidentifiable. He made a note. Who handled the funeral arrangements? Tasha, I said. All of it. That got Denise's attention. She declared him dead, she murmured, but never filed a formal death certificate through the coroner's office. Wallace leaned back. She faked it. I sat straighter. You think she staged his death? I've seen it before, he said. Insurance fraud, or a cover-up. If Vernon needed Marcus out of the picture, faking a death keeps the heat off. Denise tapped the table. So what do we do now? Wallace looked at me. How far are you willing to go, Olivia? I met his gaze without flinching. All the way, whatever it takes. He nodded. Then let's shake the tree. I'll put out quiet feelers. See if Marcus's name pops in any off-the-record databases. Meanwhile, you keep playing dumb with Tasha. Let her think you're still grieving. I nodded slowly. And if she tries to run, we'll be ready. As we left the diner, the wind had picked up. I pulled my coat tighter around me. I had walked into that place as a grieving mother. I walked out as a woman with a mission. My son was out there somewhere. And Tasha? She was going to answer for every lie. Denise parked in front of my house under a sky bruised with clouds, the kind of afternoon that feels like the moment before rain, heavy and hush quiet. I stared at the brick facade, the familiar steps leading up to the porch, and felt something unfamiliar tug at me, like this house had been waiting, watching, and now it finally knew I was returning with fire in my veins. I stepped out of the car, clutching the crumpled envelope with Marcus's letter tucked inside my coat. Denise closed her door beside me with a tap that meant, "You're not alone in this." We walked up the front steps slowly, like we were entering enemy territory. Once inside, the silence was deafening. The coffee table still had the same crochet doily my late husband used to tease me about. The same framed photo of Marcus's high school graduation, his cap tilted, grin wild and sure. A life that I once believed had ended, but it hadn't ended. It had been stolen. I dropped my bag inside the foyer and walked into the living room. So many memories sat here, Sunday dinners that turned into stories late into the night. Marcus curled up beside me watching old shows, the way he once yanked on my sleeve and said, "Mama, you're the strongest person I know." And now, the man I thought I lost had been alive somewhere out there. I hadn't known whether to cry or scream. Denise appeared in the doorway behind me with a folder. "I took the liberty of scanning through public records while we were in Des Moines," she said quietly. "I pulled everything tied to Clay Vernon in Wisconsin, and there's something interesting." She dropped the folder on the coffee table. My eyes tracked the words. Clay Vernon Enterprises corporate filings, ownership interests, suspicious activity reports, transactions. Numbers, addresses, names. One entry below the rest was highlighted in yellow. Vernon Properties LLC, 1423 East Frederick Avenue, Milwaukee active account, no public owner listed. My stomach did a slow flip. "That address," I said, trailing off. "They've got an interest in the same row house district where you used to visit Tasha," Denise said. "Same neighborhood, same block." My throat tightened. I pictured that hallway, the narrow stairs, the faded wallpaper peeling slightly at the corners, the place where I had stood, envelope in hand, anxiously waiting for a glimpse of Zayden only weeks ago. And now, it turned out that the person behind the facade wasn't just connected financially, he was embedded in the very neighborhoods we walked through. I closed my eyes. "Vernon's not just a name on a letter," Denise continued. "He's been buying property around here quietly for years, and where there's property, there's leverage. And where there's leverage, people like him don't miss opportunities." I nodded. "So what's next?" I whispered. "We get proof," she said. "Wallace is pulling strings. He's got a guy who can access old land records, utility bill histories, even communications tied to those properties. If Vernon's been there, we'll find footprints." And then slowly the doorbell rang. I didn't flinch. Denise didn't flinch. I walked to the door and opened it a crack, peering through the peephole. On the porch stood a woman tall, polished, hair pulled back tight, a handbag slung over her forearm like an accessory made of sharp intent. Her eyes locked onto mine before I could even recognize her face. Tasha. The name hit like a slap. She didn't look guilty. She didn't hesitate. She just stood there in the fading light, masked expression unreadable. "I knew you'd be here," she said. Her voice didn't shake. Not a single tremor. She stepped inside before I could stop her. "I have something that belongs to you." My heart thumped. "What?" I asked. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope identical to the one I kept in my coat. "My son's final checkbook," she said, placing it on the coffee table. I stared at the familiar embossed leather. The edge, worn from years of use, Marcus's handwriting faded on the cover. "Why? Why give this now?" I asked, barely controlling my voice. "They didn't want you to have it," she said softly, eerily calm. "Clay Vernon's people. They told me what would happen if anything leaked. They told me to keep quiet." I blinked. "You worked with him," I whispered. Her lips tightened. "I didn't have a choice," she said. "He owns every part of my life, every job I ever got, every landlord who would rent to me. I was drowning in debt before Clay stepped in. He said—" I interrupted her. "You threatened my son." She flinched only slightly, but enough that I saw it. "He needed help," she said, voice low. "We were in deep trouble. Marcus thought he could fix it. He made me think we could fix it, but they're ruthless." Denise stepped forward. "So you took money from her retirement, from her grief, for 4 years. Tasha's eyes flashed. "She said she'd never hurt me," Tasha whispered. "She said she'd protect me." And I believed her. I stared at her in disbelief. "She protected you," Denise said flatly, "by keeping your mouth shut while she built an empire out of fear." Tasha didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked out the door, leaving the checkbook on the table and her silence in the air behind her. I opened the leather cover slowly. Inside were Marcus's initials, pen, scrawled with familiar care, and a folded sheet of paper I had never seen before. I unfolded it carefully. It read merely, "Find the safe. It's in the attic, under the floorboard. Everything you need is there." My breath caught. I looked at Denise. She looked back. "We have to go upstairs," she said. "Yes," I whispered, "because somewhere beneath this old house, beneath memories and dust and the things we tell ourselves to get through the night was the next part of the truth, and I was ready to find it." My feet made soft thuds on the old wooden stairs as I climbed toward the attic, the air thicker the higher I went, as though memories, dust, and unanswered questions were pressing down on me. Denise followed me closely, flashlight in hand, its beam trembling slightly with each step I took. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that holds on to every footfall, every breath. I remembered the laughter that once echoed here, Marcus chasing me around the furniture, us playing cards late into the night, the sound of the oven timer dinging while we waited for fresh bread. But now, there was only this. The attic hatch creaked as I pushed it open, and a blast of stale air met me. The beam of the flashlight cut through shadows thicker than ink. A few old trunks sat in dust-covered corners, our things, packed away years ago. I swallowed hard and stepped inside. "Start here," I said, pointing at an old cedar chest, its surface cracked but sturdy. I knelt beside it, Denise right behind me. The metal latch was stiff, untouched for years. I had forgotten the smell of cedar wood, the scent of winter blankets and forgotten sweaters that only an attic could hold. I lifted the lid. Inside were old photographs, letters and envelopes faded from time, and beneath them a heavy black leather briefcase. My breath hitched. Denise looked at me. "That wasn't there before." I shook my head. Hands trembling, I reached for the briefcase and unbuckled the clasps. It opened with a soft pop like a secret exhaling. Inside were folders, each thick with papers, and on top of them a small envelope with my name scrawled in my son's handwriting. I pulled it out, hands shaking. "For Mama before anything else." I opened it. Inside was a single key, small, brass, heavy with importance, and a note. "Safe key, under the floorboard. 3rd plank from the left." My heart thudded like a drum in my chest. 3rd plank from the left. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. Every memory of this house rushed through me. The squeaky step by the living room door, the faded rug where Zayden used to play, the floorboards I had walked across 1,000 times and never noticed. Denise bent over the briefcase. "These look like bank statements, contracts, correspondence," she said quietly. "And these," she pulled out another stack, "are emails printed out. They're between Marcus and someone named C. Someone with direct references to Vernon Properties." My breath caught. She continued, "This one's dated June last year. Says here Marcus was close to a breakthrough, something big involving Vernon. He mentioned gathering proof to expose illegal fund transfers, offshore accounts, money laundering." I stared at the words on the page. Marcus, trying to expose them, trying to protect us. Tears stung my eyes. "We need to search the floorboard," Denise said. I nodded. We climbed down from the attic and made our way back to the living room. The third plank from the left was easy once you knew what to look for. It had a slightly different grain, a faint scar along its edge. I knelt, heart pounding, and slid the key into the small brass lock I had never noticed before. The floorboard lifted with a soft click. Inside was a metal box, small but heavy. I set it on the coffee table, and when I opened it, I gasped. Inside were stacks of documents, photos, transcripts of recorded conversations, financial ledgers showing transactions between Vernon Properties and accounts tied to Tasha. There were copies of emails between Marcus and Clay Vernon, texts demanding he stop his investigation. There were photos of meetings, receipts, and bank statements with names, dates, numbers, and at the bottom an envelope marked, "For the authorities, for Nana, for the truth." My hands shook as I unfolded the contents. There were bank records showing money moving from accounts connected to Vernon Properties into an unmarked offshore account. There were correspondences between Tasha and Clay, talks of hush money, deadlines, threats, and then my heart sank the last pages of the stack. A video transcript. It described a meeting, notes taken by Marcus, a confrontation with Clay Vernon himself. "You should have stayed out of this, Carter," the transcript read. "I didn't start this, Vernon, but you're damn well going to finish it." And the final line, "Audio cut, video lost." I sank into the sofa, teetering between rage and grief. Denise put a steady hand on my shoulder. This is everything," she said quietly. "But it's dangerous," I whispered. She nodded. "Which is why we hand it to Wallace, the right people." I looked around my home, the place built on love, now stained by deceit. My eyes rested on the photo of Marcus. He had wanted the truth. And now, finally, I had it. I closed the envelope, heart pounding, and stood. "We go to Wallace tomorrow. It's dried." Denise nodded. We were ready. I was ready. Because this time, the truth wouldn't stay buried under floorboards. I woke before dawn with a restless heaviness in my chest, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. My eyes drifted straight to the wooden floorboards beneath the quilt. I thought of the secret safe tucked away under that familiar living room plank. Just yesterday, we uncovered the proof that tore everything open. Marcus's plans, his fight, and the truth about Vernon, Tasha, and how far they'd gone. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and closed my eyes again, trembling with a mixture of dread and resolve. Denise was already in town, staying at a motel near my house so we could hit the ground running. We had to get to Wallace before word spread, before anyone could bury the evidence we'd found. I dressed in silence, the quiet of the morning amplifying every sound. My breathing, the soft creak of the floor, the distant hum of traffic beyond the windows. I poured coffee that tasted bitter but necessary and rehearsed the words I didn't yet know how to say. Finally, I stepped out onto the porch, the cool October air crisp against my face. I held the envelope with Marcus's name on it, still sealed in my purse, and breathed in deep. This day had the weight of finality. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about reclaiming the dignity of a life that had been erased. Denise pulled up in her Buick shortly after, her expression serious but steady, the kind of look that said she was already 10 steps ahead in her mind. We didn't exchange words. There was none needed. The gravity of what we were doing stretched between us like a taut string. We drove to the police station to meet Wallace first thing, just as he'd suggested. Old brick walls stood silent in the morning light, and I felt a tremor of anxiety, like the truth weighed so much it might break me before I even spoke it. Denise marched ahead with the folders tucked under her arm, and I followed, clutching my purse like a shield. Wallace was already waiting for us by the security desk, coffee in hand and a lined folder on the counter. "Morning," he said quietly. There was no small talk, only recognition of the urgency between us. We moved to a small conference room down the hall. I watched him sit, watched Denise place each document in order, watched Wallace's face shift from professional neutrality to growing concern as he reviewed the evidence. First came the financial records. Every fraudulent transfer, every offshore accounting link, every suspicious transaction between Clay Vernon's properties and accounts that intersected with Tasha's digital footprint. Then came Marcus's correspondence emails, texts, and those troubling transcripts from the safe. His words leapt from the page like a wounded bird struggling to fly, chronicling a man in the thick of a battle he never intended to fight alone. Wallace stopped at one page. "This will either expose everything or bury me." The sentiment echoed in my chest. "I'd say he was right," Wallace murmured. Denise leaned closer. "We need this pushed quietly. We can't tip anyone off prematurely." "Ask guys, it was about to day 02, Wallace nodded. "I'll take it to the Internal Affairs Division. They have federal contacts who can handle financial crimes, money laundering, wire fraud, coercion. This is a wide net. But with names like Vernon and documented threats against your son, we build a strong case." I swallowed hard. "And Tasha? She'll be questioned. Her financial records, her communications. If she's been complicit, she'll be in trouble." My throat went dry. "And Zayden?" I asked softly. "What happens to him?" Wallace looked at me with empathy I didn't expect. "He's not at fault. He's your grandson. There's a good chance you'll be considered for guardianship, especially with these documents showing how he ended up with Vanessa." A tear slid down my cheek, not for what had been done, but for what was finally being undone. We left the station with more questions than answers, but now we had momentum. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Tonight. 4th Street. Alone." My heart plummeted. Denise saw my expression before I even unlocked the message. "That doesn't look good," she said. I stared at the screen. On one hand, it could be a trap. On the other, it could be Marcus. I didn't want to hope, but part of me couldn't stop. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Denise asked quietly. I hesitated, then nodded slowly. "If it's him, this might be our chance to hear his side." Denise was silent, thoughtful. "But if it's a setup," she said, "we're walking into danger without backup." My stomach churned. "I need to know," I whispered. "And you will," she said, "but not alone." We agreed to bring Wallace in. By evening, we had a plan. The text message led us to an abandoned warehouse near the river, a place that reeked of old decisions and forgotten shadows. I felt the chill settle in my bones as we neared the place, the waning sun casting long silhouettes on the cracked pavement. Wallace stood behind us, flashlight in hand, voice calm but alert. We called out, "Marcus?" Silence. Then a figure stepped forward, tall in the dim light, familiar in a way that made my breath catch. "Mama," he whispered. It was him, alive, and standing right in front of me. My breath hitched as a single tear slipped down my cheek. He wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a memory. He was real. "Marcus," I said, voice cracking. He lifted his hand slowly, his eyes weary but unmistakably his own. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I never wanted you to see me like this." I stepped forward, heart pounding. "Why did you leave me to think you were dead?" His gaze flickered with guilt, regret, and something darker. "I thought it was the only way to protect you," he said. "But I was wrong." And in that moment, I knew this wasn't the end of truth. It was the beginning of confrontation. The cold inside the warehouse was sharp like an open wound in the air. The river beyond, hidden in shadow, murmured quietly, as though its voice knew secrets I was just beginning to uncover. My breath came out in slow, trembling swirls, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. There, in the half-light, stood Marcus, thin, worn, but unmistakably alive. I can still see the moment every memory of him collided in my mind. His face, hollowed by worry, yet lit by recognition. His eyes, those same eyes I had watched as a boy learning to ride a bike, the eyes that once smiled at every Sunday dinner I cooked, the eyes that had looked at me the last time I saw him when I thought he was gone forever. "Mama," he whispered, his voice low and strained. I took a step toward him, then another, and suddenly I wasn't thinking, just moving, like a magnet pulled me forward. "Marcus," I breathed. He closed the distance between us slowly, almost afraid I might vanish if he moved too fast. When he was close enough to touch, I felt the years crash down around me like thunder on an old roof. "My God," I said, voice thick, "you're alive." "Yes," he whispered, "I'm alive." Behind him, a faint glow from a flickering light bulb revealed stacks of old crates and cardboard boxes, a landscape of abandoned things, and things that would rather stay forgotten. The warehouse felt like a graveyard of memories, but right here, right now, Marcus stood in the open like a truth I wasn't sure I could grasp. I reached out, but he hesitated, like he didn't know if he deserved a touch. "Mama," he said again, softer this time, like he was saying a prayer he had whispered 1,000 times in the dark. My eyes watered, but I blinked them away. "Why?" I finally demanded. "Why did you make me think you were dead? Why did you vanish?" He looked away, jaw tense, hands clenched at his sides. "I thought it would protect you," he said. "From them. Tasha's involvement? Vernon? You left me with nothing but a coffin and a lie." He flinched at the words, as though the truth had hit him too. "I didn't know how else to keep you safe," he murmured. "When I realized what Clay Vernon was capable of, when I saw how deep it went, I knew if they thought I was alive, they'd come after you. They'd come after Zayden." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "I would have helped you," I said. "Marcus, I would have fought with you." He closed his eyes, and in that moment, I saw the man I'd raised, not just the ghost of his supposed death. "You don't understand," he said, voice breaking. "You have no idea what he's capable of. Vernon isn't just dangerous, he's powerful. People disappear because of money, because of fear, because of who he knows." I swallowed hard, the mention of Vernon's name twisting something inside me. Denise's voice echoed from behind us. "We're not here to capture you, Marcus. We're here to help." I turned toward her briefly, then back to my son. "Help?" Marcus repeated, like the word tasted strange on his tongue. "Yes," I said firmly. "We have evidence proof that what happened was wrong. We're taking it to the authorities. You don't have to hide anymore." His gaze dropped. "Vernon's reach is long," he said. "And getting out from under him, it's not like flipping a switch." Denise stepped forward. "We have Wallace. He's with Internal Affairs. He has contacts. If we bring this forward the right way, people like Vernon, they get exposed, and they get taken down." Marcus's eyes flickered with something: fear, hope, confusion, maybe all three. I felt tears sting again, not for the years lost, not for the grief we lived through, but for this moment of fragile truth between us. I took another step closer. "Whatever you were facing," I said gently, "you never had to face it alone." And it was the first time I'd said it out loud. Marcus looked at me, really looked, and I saw the weight of those years on his shoulders, the battle scars beneath his calm exterior. "I'm scared, Mama," he admitted. "Not for me. For you. For Zayden." "Intel Said," I nodded, understanding the fear not just of Vernon, but of losing the people you love because you tried to protect them. "Then let's fight together," I said. Denise exhaled quietly. Wallace stepped to the side, already on his phone making arrangements, authorities alerted, safe transport prepped. In the dim warehouse light, I reached out, and for the first time in 4 years, my son didn't flinch. He let me hold him. And in that small gesture, barely a touch, barely a breath, something shifted. Not just between us, but within me. The truth was here, and now we were about to turn it into justice. The drive to the federal building was quiet. I sat in the back seat of Denise's Buick, with Marcus beside me and Wallace riding shotgun, his expression all business even before we stepped through those towering doors. The autumn light filtered through the windows and cast long shadows on the dashboard, as if time itself were stretching out in anticipation. We weren't just walking into a building full of people in suits and badges. We were walking into the next phase of truth. I focused on my breathing, slow inhales and measured exhales. Marcus had been silent since we left the warehouse, and I didn't want to push him before he was ready. But I could feel his tension tight, coiled, like a spring wound too many times. The guard at the entrance scanned our IDs without a second thought. The name, Detective Ron Wallace, carried weight. We were ushered into a small waiting room with beige walls and uncomfortable chairs that always seemed too low for dignity. After a few minutes that stretched like hours, a door opened and a woman stepped out. Her badge read, Special Agent Michelle Alvarez. She was tall, poised, and precise, like someone who'd never had the need to tolerate much nonsense in her life. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight bun, eyes sharp and assessing. "Mr. Wallace," she greeted, nodding respectfully. "We have evidence to present," Wallace said, sliding a thick folder across the table. She opened it. Her eyes moved quickly, documents, transcripts, screenshots, and the financials seeping with proof. When she reached the letter from Marcus and the photos from the attic evidence box, her face didn't betray surprise, only the mild acknowledgement of someone who has seen more darkness than most. Then she paused at a specific page. "These transactions," she said, tapping lightly. "This isn't just suspicious. This is organized criminal behavior." I felt a chill, like hearing it said aloud summoned the gravity of it all. "We believe there's money laundering," Wallace said, "and coercion involved. An untold number of recorded threats from Vernon's associates, also falsifying death records." She lifted her gaze and looked directly at me. "Mrs. Harris, are you willing to testify?" I swallowed. My throat was suddenly dry. "Yes," I said, clarity settling into my bones. "Whatever it takes." Agent Alvarez nodded. "Good, because this goes beyond local jurisdiction. We're going to be working with the FBI." The words hit me like frost, cold and bracing. "They'll need statements, depositions," she continued, "and we'll need your cooperation fully. This is not a small case." I could only nod. Then came the next part about witnesses, protective measures, and secure locations for interviews. That's when she turned slightly toward Marcus. "We'll want to take his statement separately," she said, steady and gentle, acknowledging the complexity of speaking with someone who had lived in the shadow of fear. Marcus looked up at me just for a moment. I reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away. That small gesture, the softness of his fingers closing around mine, gave me a measure of courage I didn't know I still had. Agent Alvarez continued, "We'll start with you, Mrs. Harris. Then we'll work with Mr. Carter. Everyone will be protected." I nodded again. Then she asked, "One more thing. Do you have any reason to believe Vernon or his associates know you're here?" My mind flashed back to the text I got in Milwaukee. "We need to talk. Tonight. Alone." It had been clever, eerie, and clearly no coincidence. "I did receive a cryptic message," I admitted, "but I don't know who it was from." She made a note. "We'll address that. For now, let's proceed." The room seemed to hum with barely contained motion, a moving forward that felt less like a step and more like crossing a threshold. The interviews began with Denise recounting observations, dates, minutes, proof cobbled together like puzzle pieces. Then came me, going through depositions, my voice steady but raw with emotion, explaining every transfer, every interaction, every unanswered question that had become its own kind of ache. When it was finally Marcus's turn, I watched from across the room as he recounted his decisions, the fear, the choices, the desperate maneuvering he did to keep us safe. It wasn't easy for him. His voice wavered. There were long stretches of silence as he gathered thoughts. When he finished, all he said was, "I was wrong. I thought I was protecting them, but I was hiding." Agent Alvarez thanked him, and soon after we filed out of the room. The hall outside seemed to breathe with the echo of truth. Wallace met us, eyes solemn but resolved. "That was good," he said quietly. "They'll review everything and begin building a case. We should expect arrests within the month." Well, I looked at Marcus, at the man who had lived in shadows longer than most should ever have to. He exhaled slowly, as though letting go of years of fear all at once. "I didn't want you to think I abandoned you," he said softly. I reached for his shoulder. "I never stopped loving you, and you came back when it mattered." He nodded, eyes glistening but steady. Agent Alvarez turned to us. "We'll take the next steps. You both should rest. You've done more than anyone could have asked." If you NNN, we left the building under a pale afternoon sky, cool, clear, and somehow lighter. I glanced at Marcus as we walked toward the car. He looked at peace not fully healed, but closer than he had been in years. As we drove away, I realized something. Justice wasn't a distant promise anymore. It was becoming real, and we were walking right into it. The week that followed felt like standing in the eye of a storm, calm on the surface, but surrounded by motion so fierce I could hear it even in my quiet moments. Phone calls, interviews, meetings with attorneys, and follow-ups with federal investigators filled my days. My body moved from room to room, car to office, courthouse to home, almost as if I were a ghost following my own life. But something inside me felt different. For the first time in 4 years, maybe more, I wasn't just reacting to loss. I was building something new on the ruins of what had been taken from me. And I needed to tell Jake. Not all the details, not the horrors or the betrayals, but the truth he deserved of his father, of our family, and of the power of honesty over fear. I picked up the phone and dialed his number one quiet afternoon, the late October sun soft and golden outside the window. My thumb hovered over the call button for a moment before I pressed it, breath catching in my throat. "Hello?" came the familiar voice, bright, curious, and 7 years old. "Hi, sweetheart," I said gently. "It's Nana." "Hey, Nana. Are you coming to my football game on Saturday?" he asked eagerly. My heart swelled. "Of course I am. What time is it?" 10 in the morning. I scored 2 touchdowns last week." "You did?" I laughed. "I'm so proud of you." End quote. He giggled, and I could almost see his grin through the phone. "Mom asked if you could bring snacks," he said. "I want fruit snacks and chocolate chip cookies." "I'm on it, buddy," I said. "I'll bring both." "Okay, see you Saturday," he said, hanging up before I could answer again. I set the phone down, smiling so wide it hurt my cheeks. I reached for the letter from Marcus, a draft of something he had been writing before the investigation took over. It was unfinished, a piece of his heart that he had wanted to give to someone, someday. I folded it carefully and placed it beside the framed photo of Marcus and Zayden when he was younger. It was time to prepare for a new kind of healing. The next morning, I met Denise at a small coffee shop near the park. She was already there, latte in hand, wearing that same steady look that always made me feel like I could handle anything. "How's Jake?" she asked. "Excited," I said. "He wants cookies." "Abe love," Denise laughed. "Of course he does." We talked about the case how Agent Alvarez had called earlier, confirming that official indictments were being drafted against Vernon Properties and at least 2 of Clay's associates. Tasha's name was on that list too. They were moving faster than I'd expected. It was progress, justice, inch by inch. But there was one piece of the puzzle still loose. "I've been thinking," I said slowly, staring out the window at the fall leaves swirling in the breeze. "We need to address what Marcus did the part about why he disappeared in the first place. Not just legally, but emotionally. For him." Denise nodded. "You mean preparing him for facing his past?" "Not just that," I said. "We need to prepare us too, because when this goes to trial, everything that happened, everything Marcus did will come out in the open, and that can hurt him again." Denise folded her hands. "You're right. We'll need a strategy. A way to support him emotionally as well as legally." I nodded, sipping my tea. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Wallace. "Need to talk. Agent Alvarez wants a strategy update. Urgent. Call when free." I dialed him immediately. "Wallace?" I asked. "Olivia," he said, voice low. "We've got something. I need you to come to the federal office again today." My pulse quickened. "What is it?" "We found communications between Clay Vernon and another individual, someone who's been off the radar. But something in these messages, it points to a possible witness, someone who might be willing to talk." I felt a flicker of hope. "Do you want me there?" I asked. "Yes. And bring Marcus if he's ready." I hesitated. "Tell me this isn't a trap," I said softly. Wallace chuckled. "If it's a trap, I'll be the first person to jump in front of you. Trust me." "If you two." I smiled, even though the knot in my stomach tightened. "I'll be there." I hung up and took a deep breath. When I told Denise, her eyes lit up with determination. "We have to bring Marcus," she said. "This could be the break." I nodded. A few hours later, we were back in the car, heading to the federal office again, but this time with Marcus beside me. He rode quietly, gazing out the window as the cityscape blurred past. There was a calmness about him, strong, grounded, and cautious. When we arrived, Agent Alvarez was waiting in the lobby, her posture crisp but welcoming. "Good to see you both," she said. "Come with me." She led us through a maze of hallways until we reached a secure meeting room. Inside, Sitting at the table was a woman mid-40s, composed with kind eyes that hid something heavy beneath. Alvarez introduced her. "This is Eleanor Blake. She used to work closely with Clay Vernon. I'm see the dam is the place." Eleanor stood slowly, her eyes meeting Marcus's briefly before settling on me. "I know this is difficult," she said, voice steady, "but I couldn't stay silent anymore." I took a deep breath. Maybe, just maybe, we were about to uncover the final piece. She cleared her throat. "I'm ready to tell the truth." The air in the federal office was still like the calm before a storm broke loose. I stood near the entrance of the secure meeting room, hands slightly trembling, a stack of documents tucked under my arm. Denise hovered beside me with a steady presence, a quiet reassurance that grounded me. Marcus stood across from us, his expression calm yet guarded like a man who had survived storms most people never knew existed. Agent Alvarez closed the door behind us, and we took our seats. Across the polished table sat Eleanor Blake, the woman who, moments ago, had offered a name with the weight of revelation behind it. Her eyes were soft, but there was sadness there too, as though telling the truth was something she'd wrestled with long before today. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with us," Alvarez began, her tone respectful and clear. "Anything you tell us will be used to help with the investigation." Eleanor nodded, taking a deep breath. "I shouldn't be here," she said quietly, hands folded in her lap. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. I felt my heart tighten. "You can speak freely," Denise said gently. "We're listening." Eleanor lifted her gaze, straight to mine, even to Marcus's. "I worked with Clay Vernon for 8 years, she said. "I was in his finance department, handling communications between him and his legal teams, investors, partners, everything. I saw transactions that didn't make sense, accounts that weren't tied to legitimate business, but I was too afraid to say anything." She paused, breath catching slightly. "Until Marcus came to me." My breath hitched. "What?" Marcus said. Eleanor gave a small, sad smile. "He came to me a year before he disappeared," she said. "He asked me to help him trace some accounts, something he thought might expose Vernon's laundering operations. I told him it was dangerous. I told him to walk away." She looked down, voice thick. "But he didn't." I felt a chill run down my spine. "You were helping him?" I asked, voice low. "In a way," she said. "He didn't want to hurt his family. He wanted to be careful, to do it right. But when he realized how deep the money went, he knew it was bigger than any of us." Marcus leaned forward, jaw tense. "I wasn't trying to protect myself," he said. "I was trying to build a case that couldn't be ignored." Eleanor nodded. "That's when things changed." She paused for a moment, seemingly gathering strength. "Clay found out. He knew someone was looking into the books, and he wanted to know who. When he didn't get the answers he expected." Her voice trailed. "But what did he do?" Marcus asked, his voice steady but emotional. Eleanor hesitated, then said, "He didn't kill you. Not directly. But he made sure everyone believed you were gone. That way, no one would look twice. They have to do as them." I closed my eyes, trying to hold on to something solid as the truth unfolded. "So he faked my death?" Marcus asked. "Yes," Eleanor said quietly. "He knew if you vanished without a trace, people would assume the worst, and that would buy him time." I felt my heart clench. "But why let my mother believe I was dead?" Marcus asked. Eleanor looked at me with sorrow. "Because Clay wanted no loose ends. If anyone found out you were alive, it would bring everything crashing down. I'm 7. I swallowed hard, the pain beginning to settle deep in my chest. "But I can help," she continued. "I have documents, emails, transaction records, correspondence, everything you need to show beyond doubt what happened." Alvarez leaned in, alert and focused. "Any evidence you can provide will be crucial," she said. Eleanor reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder thick with printouts, screenshots, and digital logs. "This is what Clay didn't want anyone to see," she said. "The trail leads to offshore accounts, shell corporations, and direct links between Vernon's properties and illegal ventures." Denise took the folder with gloved hands, each paper examined carefully. I watched as Marcus flipped through a sheet, his eyes narrowed, but in them I saw something else. Relief. Not the relief of vindication, no, but the relief of finally being understood. After a long silence, I spoke. "Thank you," I said to Eleanor. My voice was steady but thick with emotion. "What you've done, It takes courage." She nodded softly. "I'm sorry it took this long," she said. "But I couldn't stay part of something that was wrong." Alvarez closed her notebook and stood. "We'll secure these documents, begin verification, and integrate them into the case file," she said. "This will expedite the process." Then she looked at us. "The trials will be complex," she warned. "Clay Vernon is resourceful and has influence. We'll do what we can to keep you safe." "Aksher." I exhaled deeply, slowly. "We're ready," I said. Marcus stood, his gaze steady, his posture stronger than it had been in years. Denise gave a supportive nod. Eleanor offered us a small, tentative smile. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of movement, like the past was finally giving space for the future. We walked out of the meeting room together, the weight of truth behind us and the promise of justice ahead. Outside, the sun was bright, clear, and unfiltered. I breathed it in, and for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. The courtroom was cold and silent that morning, quiet in the way only anticipation from 1,000 unspoken truths can make a place feel. I stood at the edge of the marble steps outside the federal courthouse, the cool October wind tugging at my coat, and watched as the sun climbed slowly above the city skyline. The air smelled like rain had just passed through, leaving behind a kind of clarity that seemed fitting for a day like this. Marcus stood beside me, tall and steady in a dark suit that seemed a size too formal but carried his determination like armor. Denise was just behind us, her posture confident, ready like any battle she'd ever faced before. And at our sides were Wallace and Agent Alvarez, quietly serious as they checked their notes and communicated with the legal team one last time before the proceedings began. "Remember," Wallace said, lowering his voice as we walked up the steps, "justice isn't decided by emotion, it's decided by truth, and we have plenty of that." I nodded, but my heart felt as if it were tethered to something deeper, something emotional that legal language could never entirely capture. Inside, the courthouse was a cathedral of justice, high ceilings, polished wood, hushed voices that felt like they weighed every word before it left someone's lips. We were ushered into the gallery, a wooden bench flanked by attorneys, journalists, and observers who'd come for the high-profile case. At the defense table sat Tasha, her face drawn and pale, eyes darting between her attorney and the jury. Beside her sat a man I didn't recognize, likely her new partner in the life she built while my world was collapsing. On the other side, lawyers representing Vernon Properties maintained stoic expressions, their suits impeccable, their posture almost smug in its precision. At nearly 10 o'clock, Judge Reynolds entered, an imposing woman in her late 60s with sharp eyes and an aura that made everyone in the room sit a little straighter. The proceedings began. Agent Alvarez stood first as the government's lead witness. She walked the jury through the timeline, methodically laying out the evidence. The forged account changes, the offshore transactions, the falsified affidavits of death, and the extensive paper trail that tied Vernon and Tasha together in conspiracy. Her voice was firm, factual, and unwavering. You could almost hear every financial lie unravel in real time as she spoke. Then came Denise, her voice steady and calm as she testified about her observations. My visits to Tasha's house, the way the account changed, the anomalies in the legal filings, and how she helped compile the evidence that exposed the truth. She spoke without judgment, only fact. When it was my turn, I felt as though my mother's heart was standing beside me. I took a deep breath and described every transfer I'd made, every unanswered call, every hopeful message that faded into silence. I talked about walking into that apartment that day, about being pushed and dismissed, about the heartbreak of thinking my son was dead. I didn't break down. But when I mentioned Zayden, my grandson, my voice wavered for just a moment. The courtroom didn't flinch. It listened. And then they called Marcus to the stand. He walked up slowly, composed like someone who had carried a long secret with dignity. His testimony was honest, unfiltered, and raw without being bitter. He spoke about fear, about protection, about the choices he made that placed him in danger and pushed him into hiding. He spoke about love, about why he left, and why he came back. The defense tried to poke at his credibility, suggested mental instability, implied motives that tried to paint his disappearance as irresponsible. But each attempt fell apart under the weight of the black and white truth laid out by evidence that was overwhelming. There were documents from the attic safe, emails from Eleanor Blake, trail after trail of financial records that refused to be denied. By the time Marcus stepped down from the witness stand, something had changed in that courtroom. It was no longer about defense. It was about reality. Then came the moment that made my heart skip. Agent Alvarez called Vanessa Blake to testify not just as an observer, but as someone who had seen the machinations from the inside. She described how Vernon's operation worked, the documents she'd shared, and how Marcus's investigation had unearthed things that could no longer stay hidden. But the most powerful testimony came when she spoke about Zayden's guardianship, the truth behind how it was obtained, the misrepresentation, the coercion, the legal manipulation that Tasha used to erase our family from my grandson's life. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I held them back. Justice doesn't break at tears, it stands firm. The defense put up little resistance after that. They knew the truth was unfolding like a force of nature that could not be denied. Judge Reynolds called for a brief recess before closing arguments. I stepped outside with Denise and Marcus, breathing in the crisp air. Leaves danced across the pavement. The sky was pale blue, an imperfect, hopeful backdrop to a day that had already rewritten so many things. "I never thought I'd hear your voice in here," I whispered to Marcus. He looked at me, eyes soft, steady. "I almost didn't come," he admitted. "But I knew I had to." Denise smiled quietly. "Today is the beginning of the end," she said. "Not just for the defendants, but for you, your truths, your healing, your family." I nodded, feeling a lightness I hadn't felt in years. We went back inside. The courtroom was still waiting. As the attorneys prepared for closing statements, I closed my eyes for a moment, and I saw my grandson's face, bright, smiling, unaware of the storms adult lives sometimes create. I whispered under my breath, "For you, Jake, for all of us." Because justice was no longer a distant hope. It was about to become real. The courtroom was heavy with anticipation again, like the moment just before thunder breaks across a gray sky. Everyone knew this was the turning point, closing arguments. Not just for the case, but for every betrayal, every lie that had brought us here, every stolen moment of grief and fear. I sat beside Marcus and Denise, hands clasped tight around mine. I didn't want to think about what happened next. I wanted to feel it like a heartbeat, solid and real, not just a legal procedure. The government's attorney stood first. She paced slowly, voice clear and strong, wrapping every thread of evidence into a narrative that was almost undeniable. The forged death certificate, the fraudulent bank transfers, the offshore accounts tied directly to Vernon Properties and Tasha's complicity, the coerced guardianship of Zayden. Every point connected to another, a chain of deception that had cost us years of truth and peace. Then the defense attorney rose. He tried to paint my family as reckless, unstable, overly emotional, a broken family grasping for closure. He hinted that Marcus fabricated fear to cover personal failures. He suggested that documents could be out of context. He said Vernon was a respected businessman, a benefactor to communities, a man of influence. But every time he tried to weaken the evidence, Agent Alvarez's testimony, or the documents from Eleanor Blake, that narrative collapsed like a house built on sand. Finally, the defense rested. And then it was Marcus's turn to stand again, not as a fugitive, not as a misunderstood son, but as a man who faced his truth. His voice didn't shake. It was steady, imbued with both regret and clarity. "When I walked away," he said, locking eyes with the jury, "my intention was never to abandon my family, but I couldn't risk the people I loved being dragged into something too dangerous for them to bear." He paused. "I believed disappearing was the only way to keep them safe. But I was wrong. Running didn't protect them. It only prolonged the pain." I felt a tear slip as I remembered every anniversary I spent grieving a child I thought was gone, every Sunday without him at the table, every time I whispered his name in prayer. Marcus continued, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for understanding, for the courage it took to face those fears and come back with truth in hand." 80. The room was still like time had paused to listen. Then came the moment we'd waited for. Judge Reynolds stood her eyes, surveying the room, heavy with decades of experience and the responsibility of justice. She cleared her throat. "You have heard testimony. You have reviewed the evidence. You have listened to both sides." Her gaze paused, meeting mine for a heartbeat longer than I expected. Now this court must deliver its verdict. My stomach tightened. Then she spoke the words that felt like an earthquake underfoot. On the charges against Amanda Carter Sullivan and Anthony Clay Vernon, guilty. Gasps echoed through the courtroom, soft, stunned, like the sound of glass breaking. Judge Reynolds continued, and on the charge of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and falsifying official records, guilty. The tension in my shoulders eased ever so slightly. But on the matter of custodial deception regarding the guardianship of Zayden Carter, this court finds the application materially misrepresented and granted under false pretenses. The words sank into every fiber of me. Justice wasn't just served, it was meticulously delivered. Tasha's face drained of color, her lawyer's jaw clenched, and Vernon's expression, a practiced mask of calm, cracked just once, like a fissure in stone. The judge moved to sentencing. Vernon received a lengthy federal sentence for his crimes, including financial penalties, restitution, and prohibition from holding any authoritative position in business. Tasha's sentence, though lighter than Vernon's, still reflected the severity of her actions. Her complicity in fraud, exploitation of trust, and obstruction of justice would cost her years behind bars. I watched Marcus exhale after the sentence was read, like someone who had been holding his breath for years. When Judge Reynolds spoke about Zayden's custody, she looked directly at me. "Olivia Harris," she said, "this court recognizes your unwavering commitment to your grandson's well-being, as well as your role in bringing these truths to light. The court awards legal guardianship of Zayden Marcus Carter to you, effective immediately." I felt tears sting, tears of relief, sorrow, triumph. I wasn't just a grandmother anymore. I was his guardian, his protector, his truth-bearer. The courtroom erupted with quiet emotion, some with applause, others with muffled sobs. Denise leaned over, her voice soft. "You did it." I glanced at Marcus, who looked older somehow, but steadier, like a man who had reclaimed something that was stolen. He whispered, "Thank you." And I knew he meant it in a way deeper than gratitude. He meant it as a bond restored. We walked out into the daylight like survivors returning home, sunlight bright and forgiving. Outside, Zayden waited, smiling, unaware of every legal battle that had raged in his name, unaware of the truth that had been wrested from lies. He ran toward me with open arms. "Mama!" he cried. I lifted him, holding him close. "I'm here, sweetheart," I said, and in that moment, I wasn't just free from the past. I was ready for the future. A future built on truth, love, and justice. The morning after the verdict, sunlight fell across my porch in soft ribbons, warm and hopeful in a way it never had before. I watched the leaves turn gold and amber, swirling down the sidewalk like they were dancing to celebrate a long-delayed victory. After years of shadows and secrets, it felt like the world was reminding me that healing had a season too. Inside, the house felt different. Not empty, not heavy. Full of possibility. I walked slowly through the living room, letting my fingers brush the back of the sofa, the same spot where I had cried alone more times than I could count. I stopped by the mantel and looked at the framed photo, Marcus and little Zayden at his 2nd birthday. Happy, unaware of the pain to come. I let out a slow breath. Today was the first step toward rebuilding what had been broken. A knock sounded at the front door. My heart fluttered not with fear, but with a gentle expectation. I opened it to see Denise smiling, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Morning," she said brightly. "I brought reinforcements." I laughed, the sound light and free. "Thank you," I said, taking a cup. I needed that. We stood on the porch together, sipping coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. "So," Denise said, eyes glinting with that familiar spark, "what's the first thing you're going to do as a free woman?" I thought about it for a moment. "Live," I whispered. "Really live. And I'm going to start by seeing my grandson not as a visitor, but as his guardian, as the person he deserves." Denise nodded. "He's a lucky kid." "I know," I said. "I want to make sure he knows that too." Later that morning, I drove to Zayden's school. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of earth and promise. My heart thumped like a drum in my chest as I walked up to the entrance this time, not as an anxious grandmother denied access, but as someone officially part of his life, part of his world. When the teacher called Zayden's name, his face lit up when he saw me. "Nana!" He ran into my arms, nearly lifting me off my feet. I squeezed him tight, feeling his warmth, his life, and the pure, unjaded love that only a child could offer. "I missed you," I whispered. I told Mrs. Carter you'd come, he said proudly. "She said you looked happy." I laughed and kissed the top of his head. "I am happy, sweetheart. I really am." He took my hand as we walked out together, his small fingers wrapped around mine like they were never letting go. Later that afternoon, we set up a little picnic in the backyard, a small celebration of the new beginning. Sandwiches, juice boxes, and his favorite chocolate chip cookies filled the table. Zayden talked with the animated confidence only a child possesses stories about school, dinosaurs, and the fact that he thought Nana made the best cookies in the world. "That's true," I told him proudly. And it was. After lunch, we sat on the grass, the sun warming our faces. He turned to me with curious eyes. "Nana," he asked, "is Daddy coming home soon?" I felt the question pierce something deep. I looked into his hopeful eyes so much like his father's. I took a breath. "Your daddy is working on something very important," I said gently. "And soon, he won't have to hide anymore." He nodded slowly, trusting my words without hesitation. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus arrived. He stood at the gate, his posture relaxed but thoughtful, like a man learning how to stand again in the light of day. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," I replied, smiling. We spent the evening on the porch, sipping tea, listening to the crickets hum. "It's strange," he said after a moment, "to feel normal." I looked at him, a warm breeze brushing the leaves overhead. "Maybe normal doesn't come all at once," I said. "Maybe it grows slowly, like the sunrise." He nodded, gazing at the glowing horizon where daylight met dusk. "I like that," he said. We sat in quiet, understanding the kind only family can share. A day filled with laughter, healing, and new beginnings. A day without fear. A day with justice. And a future we could finally face together. The morning sun filtered through the curtains in soft golden stripes. It was the kind of day that promised gentle warmth, even as autumn curled its orange and red fingers around the world outside. It felt like the perfect beginning not just of a day, but of a life remade from truth. I stood in the kitchen, watching steam rise from my coffee. The house felt alive with possibility, no shadows lurking, no secrets waiting to be unearthed, just light, just peace. And a future that didn't feel heavy anymore. A few minutes later, the front doorbell chimed. I opened it to find Zayden, bright-eyed and smiling, holding a mismatched bundle of autumn leaves in his little hands. "Nana, look what I found," he said, thrusting them toward me like a treasure chest. I laughed and took the leaves, inhaling that crisp scent of fall. "Those are beautiful," I said, hugging him close. He beamed. "Can we go to the park later?" "Absolutely," I said warmly. After breakfast, we sat at the kitchen table, me, my grandson, and the promise of a day with no worry heavier than figuring out his favorite pancake topping. Chocolate chips? Blueberries? Both? Both, he decided, eyes shining with certainty. I smiled, heart full. Outside, the leaves danced in soft spirals, like confetti celebrating every small joy we often overlooked. After breakfast, Marcus walked in the morning sun, catching the stray gleam of gold in his hair, like a flicker of memory and hope converging into the present. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," I replied, reaching out for his shoulder briefly, an unspoken acknowledgement that we were both here, really here, in this moment. Zayden ran up to him, hugging Marcus around the waist. "Daddy, Daddy, Nana made pancakes with both chocolate chips and blueberries." And to staying, Marcus knelt and hugged him back, eyes warm. "That sounds amazing. Can I have some too?" I laughed again, feeling a loose thread of tension unravel inside me. "Plenty for everyone," I said. We walked to the park later, Marcus and I side by side, Zayden between us, his small strides eager in the cool autumn breeze. The world seemed vast, but safe, a place that had once felt like a battlefield but now felt like ground finally claimed. At the playground, Zayden ran to the swings, shouting back to us, "Push me, Daddy, push me, Nana." We took turns, laughter carrying on the breeze, as if the trees themselves were applauding every joyful moment. And then somewhere in the middle of all that laughter, Marcus turned to me with a thoughtful look, as though something heavy had finally lifted enough for his heart to breathe. "Nana," he said quietly, "thank you for not giving up." for everything you've done. Actually, Bread. I smiled, but my eyes watered softly, the kind of tear that doesn't hurt, but reminds you of all you've survived. You came home, I said simply. That's thanks enough. He nodded, but there was more he wanted to say. I lost so much, he whispered. But you never stopped fighting. Not for me, not for Jake, not for the truth. I placed a hand over his. You never have to carry your past alone again. I am 7. We sat in that sunset glow for a long while, 3 generations connected by love, by survival, by truth. Later that evening, as amber light softened into dusk, we returned home. Inside, the house felt warmer somehow, like the walls themselves exhaled with relief at having its family back. We gathered around the living room not for anything monumental, just for a quiet moment together. Marcus and Zayden sat with blankets and a stack of board games. Laughter and playful teasing filled the room. Even Denise came over, carrying mugs of hot cocoa with marshmallows perched on top like tiny snowmen. This is what normal feels like, Zayden declared, his eyes sparkling. I smiled, looking around at the scene so ordinary, and yet so sacred. And then Marcus looked at me, a thoughtful expression settling in his eyes. Mama, he said. I turned to him, heart open. I want to help others like us, he said quietly. People whose stories slipped into shadows because someone powerful tried to silence them. I want to make sure others have a voice. I felt a rush of pride that had nothing to do with victory and everything to do with courage. That's a beautiful thing, I said. He nodded. For years I thought disappearing was protection, he continued. But I see now that truth and connection is the only real safety anyone can have. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. That's right, son. I think you not now there's and. Outside, the sky turned purple and gold like a promise made visible. Later that night, when the house was quiet and the cicadas hummed softly in the dark, I stood at Zayden's bedroom doorway, watching him drift to sleep. I whispered, more to myself than to him, thank you for choosing truth. Thank you for trusting love. I closed the door softly. Downstairs, the house was at peace. Finally, and as I stood there, surrounded by the echo of laughter and dreams yet to bloom, I knew this. We had weathered the storms, uncovered every lie, and we had emerged not just intact but stronger, kinder, and deeply rooted in truth. For the first time in a long, long while, I felt truly at home. This story is a powerful reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way to the surface. It teaches us that silence in the face of injustice only extends the pain, and that healing begins when we choose to confront lies with courage. Through Olivia's unwavering love and Marcus's redemption, we learn that family is not defined by absence or mistakes, but by the strength to fight for each other even when the world turns its back. In the end, justice isn't just about the law, it's about reclaiming dignity, restoring trust, and choosing love over fear.